Greetings of the day, everyone. I'm privileged to welcome you all into the very first children's edition of Orange City Literature Festival, organized by SDR Knowledge Foundation in association with GS Raisoni University, powered by Raisoni Group of Institutions. The motive behind the fest today is to explore the ways that should help students develop emotional intelligence. Exposing children to quality literature can contribute to the creation of responsible, successful, and caring individuals. Many times, we get in a class to introduce children to different aspects of South Asian culture, leveraging storytelling, beautiful visual elements, and simple content. It is just a matter of how you recite the story to them. Children might not read the verses, but will be attracted to the pictorial stories of the mythological characters, stories of whom are told in the style that children love. In this hour, we will be discussing children's picture books and a deep love for South Asian culture with Ms. Chitwan Mittal. Chitwan Mittal holds a BSc in English Education from Boston University and an MA in Values in Education from the University of London. She is a published author with titles such as Education for the Complete Person, Taittiriya Upanishada, and the Arguments for the Existence of God. Actively involved in children's education since 2005, she was a part of the committee that established the Indian Institution of Teacher Education and the Children's University by the Government of Gujarat, India. Both institutes are focused on experiential learning and holistic development of children through innovative educational tools. She is now foraying into the field of writing children's picture books. Her books encourage engagement and diversity and focus on value-oriented education, bilingual learning, and South Asian culture. She lives between India and Singapore with her husband and two sons, who are her constant source of inspiration.
Thank you, Dia, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for having me here today at the Orange City Literature Festival. I'm very excited to be chatting with you today.
It was wonderful. I will hand over the session to you now.
Thank you. I'd love to tell you a little bit about Adidev Press and why I started it. I started Adidev Press in 2020, and the goal was to create books which are of high quality and which introduce children to South Asian culture. I always had a love for picture books growing up, but I often realized that most of the books that we were growing when we were reading when we were growing up were of Western origin, and were repeatedly had Western characters and settings and Western ethos. I loved reading as a child, and I often wish that we could find this quality of books in South Asian publishing. And even when I went abroad to study, I did my undergrad and postgrad in Boston and London, like you mentioned. I would go and browse those bookshelves of those giant bookstores that they have there. And that was my favorite pastime. And I would find myself in children's sections of those bookstores, looking for these beautiful books that were that were beautiful to touch and hold and feel, and which were well written. And I would always wonder if I could maybe one day stumble upon a book that was of a South Asian origin. And that was not often the case. And when I was raising my own children who are living here in Singapore, I wondered how can I introduce them to their culture. And I started my hunt for these types of books again. And although there has been a lot of development in South Asian publishing, I still felt there was this gap in the market. And I wished to create books that our kids could use to, our parents could use to introduce their children to their own culture. And I wanted these books to be of very high quality, and not just in print, but also in their writing and in their illustration. So by good quality writing, I meant that I wanted the writing to be pedagogically sound. Too often you find books that are not written at the right age level, using the right kinds of words. Or often when we grew up, all the writing was books which had moral of the story at the end. They were very didactic or preachy. I wanted the text to be very light and simple and engaging. And I wanted the illustrations to be subtle and make the child wonder and be inspiring and maybe just touch straight to their soul. And quality print, I wanted really good quality print that the child would want to, touch and hold and feel and have some memory of it when they grew up, that this book was very special to me. And maybe, I mean, I don't remember everything about it, but something of it touched me, and I would love to preserve it and pass it on to the next generation. So it is with those goals in mind that we created Adidev Press and released our first 6 books this year. And I hope the audience finds that we achieve those types of things that we set out to do. So I'll give it back to you to start our conversation.
After hearing you talk about how you got just started on your journey with Adidev Press, I'm really motivated to ask you, how
Yes.
have you been attracted to the stories of Mahavira, Hanumana, and many such different characters?
Actually, I must say I was very lucky to have been in a house where my mother was very interested in the big questions of life. What is the soul? Why are we here? What is our purpose on this earth? And she was always seeking out the answers to these big questions. And so our home was filled with a lot of books and about philosophy and saints and seers. And she would invite a lot of these people into the home to give lectures. She would get study groups, and we were often invited as children to kind of listen and even ask questions. I think one of the most important things in childhood is to raise a child with a sense of wonder and the ability to ask questions. And so that was something that was very wonderful in our childhood. And growing up in a Hindu household, of course, religion is a very it's pervasive in your life. You learn your mantras and prayers. You do them at bedtime. You go to the small temple that is in the house in the morning before you go to school. And so we were introduced to all of those things. And Hanuman, of course, is one of the favorite gods of all young children, because he is like a superhero, the closest that we have to a superhero. He can grow, increase in size, decrease in size like Ant-Man, and he can have super speed like Flash, and he's super strong like Hulk, and he's super intelligent like Iron Man. So I think as a child, a lot of children will gravitate to Hanuman, as I also did, and heard the stories of Hanuman and the Ramayana from grandmothers and parents. And often we are told when we are young, okay, if you're feeling scared, just recite the verses of the Hanuman chalisa, or keep the Hanuman chalisa under your pillow, and you won't get nightmares at night. So we learn about Hanuman in that way. And so that is how it was for me as well. And what can I say about Mahavira? I think Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism are so intertwined with Hinduism, and it's pervasive in our culture. I think we have Buddhist monuments all over India, and in fact, Buddha is even considered an avatar of Vishnu. It is so they're very well integrated into our culture. And I mean, I also realized recently that the Buddhist stupa is on the back of our currency notes. It is so integrated into our culture that it's wonderful that it's there in a tangible and intangible way, and it makes you want to know more, actually. In fact, all of us have had friends who are Jain, have different diets in our schools, and we've been familiar with what they're eating, not eating. And every Sikh child with his turban and kada tells the story of Sikhism. And so these are all interesting things that leads people to want to know more about these religions and the personalities associated with them. So those were also things that made me wonder and made me question and want to know more.
In this era of technology and innovation, what was the motivation behind starting Adidev Press as a print? Uh, printing a
So I think technology is definitely everywhere. It's very pervasive. It's part of our lives now. So we must not be afraid of technology. In fact, I think we should celebrate it. Um, there is a very great educational power in technology. Even when I was young and it wasn't this pervasive, we still learned so much from watching those episodes of the Ramayana that used to come, the Ramanan Sagar's Ramayan. Every Sunday, the new episode would be released, and we would all look forward all week to watch it. And it was something that really made the Ramayan come alive. So it was something, it was a very educational learning tool. And even now, I feel that movies, TV shows, even educational apps and games on our phones and devices can be very powerful learning tools, but at the same time we cannot be limited to them, and we cannot think just because those exist books have no space anymore. So books definitely have their space and will always have their space in the child's learning journey, especially for the youngest ones. I feel we all understand that having too much screen time is not something that is very conducive to the child's development, mental development, emotional development, their eyesight. And there is something very tactile about having a book, having it in your hand and touching it and holding it and feeling it. So that adds an element of learning for the child. And books are also a very social, it builds a social connection, because for the youngest of readers, it will start with reading a book with your parent. So it will build that kind of connection, deepen those bonds of parent and child. So I feel that is definitely, it also builds imagination. So you're not seeing what you are reading, you have to visualize it. So it builds those connections in the brain to from the taking those words from the page and being able to visualize what you're seeing. Just having so much knowledge and not being able to communicate them clearly, precisely, is there is no use. So there is books will always have their place, and I felt that at this time, yes, we need books, and we need books about our culture for our children.
I completely agree. Communication is key in this day and age.
Yeah.
You made the book My First Hanuman Chalisa, and we have seen the way that you mentioned the meaning of the words of the verses. Have you thought of doing something like that, and what was the thought behind it?
So my first Hanuman Chalisa is very special to me. Like I said, I was introduced to this prayer as a young child. Ki when you're feeling scared, say it out. And I remember all those moments when I was really scared, and I'm like, Jai Hanuman Gyan Gun Sagar. I think a lot of children will relate to this experience of just learning it from memory. There were no books. There was those small little prayer books maybe, but that was not something a kid would be able to read themselves. You normally learnt it from memory, which your mother would sing or your grandmother would sing. Somebody would sing it, and you'd just memorize it. And later on, when I grew up, I got married in a family that also worshipped Hanuman very deeply. So together, we would make a family pilgrimage every year. We would go to our ancestral village in Rajasthan, and we would have we would walk from the village to a Hanuman temple, as a whole family. It's a 30-kilometer walk, 7 hours of walking. And we would go to the temple, and or the Hanuman Chalisa is inscribed into the walls of that temple. And when you're there, you'd pray to Hanuman, you'd say those verses. And again, it made me think, I'm saying the words. It's like muscle memory, you know them. And you understand a little bit of it because it is in Avdi, which is an old form of Hindi. So some words are familiar to you. But do I know everything? Do I know all the words? So even then, as an adult, I said, let me try and study. I called a teacher home, like a Sanskrit teacher. I said, explain to me each and every word meaning. But again, I don't think everything is retained when it's done in that way. And then, as a mother, when I wanted to tell my own children about the prayer, I said, oh my God, now I want them to really not just be able to remember the prayer, but I want them to understand the prayer. And I want them to fall in love with Hanuman, because that is the essential goal. It is not just ki rat lo, remember kar lo, and then move on, and then you want them to have that deep connection to Hanuman and feel that reality of that being. And so I said, I started looking for this type of book. And there are different versions with explanations and things like that. But I wanted to create one book that would be for the youngest of readers. And so we created the Hanuman Chalisa, my first Hanuman Chalisa. And the translation was done in a way, and each and every sentence was put into an app to check the readability at grade 1 and 2 level, so that the youngest of readers can read it and understand each and every word. And then we put in word meanings with arrows, so that you can go back to it. It's trying to basically take something that seems difficult, but to make it very simple in step by step manner. So our book has the original Avadi verse in the Devanagari script. It also has the transliteration in English. If somebody cannot read the Devanagari script, it shouldn't be an obstacle that, okay, if you don't know the script, this is not something accessible to you. So the transliteration is there because we are also thinking about our expat community. So if you've not learned the script, you still have access to it. We then have the translation, which is what we expect the children to be able to read. Then we have the word meanings. If you're interested, you can come back. But the most beautiful part is the illustrations. I think that is what is going to make the child actually fall in love with Hanuman, and where the word meanings actually it goes in. It's like a visual representation. I think there's a lot of different things these days where you can learn through visually. There's mnemonics, and there's people learn with sight cards and things like that. I feel when you have a visual representation of something, it really takes a hold of the heart. So we were very lucky to have found an illustrator that was able to bring Hanuman come alive. And there's a lot of movement in the book and things like that. So we really hope that we are able to create something like this for other prayers as well. I think that was your original question also. This was the first one that we've done, and I hope that other publishers too are able to take things like this from our culture, our heritage, and make them come alive for children.
Coming from, like, I have studied Sanskrit, I have studied Hindi, I have learned the Hanuman Chalisa by heart. I still don't understand some of it. So coming from someone who studied Sanskrit, if I still don't understand it, it is a really of a great help. I will surely pick up my first Hanuman Chalisa to understand what the Hanuman Chalisa actually means. Thank you so much. Can you share some stories about Mahavira and the others?
So I feel that we stop our story. I mean, India has a very rich heritage of storytelling. I think originally there was a lot of these stories were passed down as oral storytelling, through oral storytelling traditions. We had in Bengal the bards who would go with the iktaras from one village to the other and sing about the saints and stories related to them. We had the nukkad nataks in different parts of the country. We had puppet shows. So there was a deep and rich and a good storytelling tradition that would pass on these ideas about and stories about different characters, personalities. But as technology, media, everything is advancing, these storytelling traditions are kind of getting lost. And sometimes the media is only catering to the popular culture. So what will we watch the most? So let's create more of that. So I think we need to make sure that these stories and traditions are not lost, and that our next generation of children are familiarized with these stories. I feel sometimes even with books, we kind of stop at let's just tell them the basic stuff. In textbooks, we learn that, okay, Buddha, Mahavira, they were born as princes in this part of India. They lived in this time, and then maybe something made them go to meditate and find out what's the deeper truths of life. But then we stop at that. We think that what they found out is too complicated. So let's not talk about this to the children. It's too difficult for them. So I feel like that is really not doing justice to our children, to our next generation, to our future. So it is not that complicated. It can be as complicated as you want it to be. Buddhism can be as complicated as you want it to be. There can be many layers of understanding and richness, but it can be simple also. So based on my research and understanding, I found that Buddha found he wanted to find the what is the cause of suffering. That was his main thing when he saw an old man and a sick man and a dying man. He said, why must we suffer? Why, what is the cause of this suffering? And he went to meditate. He found it was desire that is the cause of suffering. Okay, this can be a complicated thing to say, but it in our book we've simplified it in simple terms with examples and daily situations that a child would encounter. So I'm not saying that even adults have like overcome desire or anything, but the idea, the basic idea that desire is the cause of suffering is something that you can say to a child. Just, it's not saying okay, you don't desire an ice cream tomorrow, or you don't, or you're going to stop, become desire free from tomorrow, but just offering the idea for thought and reflection as a seed in the mind can be done at any age. It can be done at a 3-year old's age, at a 4-year old's age. So that is the main thing I feel, that we should be able to demystify some of these complex topics and present them to children in a simple way. That is what we are trying to do in these books.
I can completely understand. In the books, there's only some parts written about Mahavira and Buddha. And it's really important to educate the children, as you mentioned, and for them to know. So that's a great initiative. How will these books help children of today's generation?
Oh, books. Books will help them. I think, particularly books that are rooted in their culture, will help them appreciate where they're coming from. It is so important to feel rooted, to have an appreciation of your own culture before you can be exposed to the rest of the world and have all those different influences. It will also help them build connections with different parts of their own country. First of all, you know, you might have a child from Uttaranchal but may not have had the opportunity to travel, like let's say Tamil Nadu or Karnataka or Assam. So to understand people from that part of the country, to understand the festivals, their their culture, their foods, their art forms, their dance forms, it helps to build connections and to build that imagination, like I said. And I think there is so many are we are so lucky to be in a country which has such deep rooted values, and these values are universal and eternal. They're as relevant today as they were in the past, and they're relevant irrespective of whether you're born in the west or the east or where you live. So we need to bring forth the values of our culture and present them in a way that are um contemporary, and that the child will be, will be open to them, that they are inspiring and engaging. And we need to simplify complex things. You might say, oh my god, Vedas, Upanishads, Gita are too difficult. They don't have to be too difficult, they don't have to be too distant. We make them feel like something very, very far and out of reach, so they can be brought within the reach of the child and help to connect him to his own culture first. So yeah.
Is there anything specific that you would like to share with the children?
I think I would love to say that read, and read some more. Diversify your bookshelf. Read different genres. Read different authors. Look for more authors which are from South Asia. Look for illustrators and publishing houses that are from here. Um, Develop your own creative mind, and maybe in the future you also can contribute to the next generation knowing about their culture, and you could yourself be an author or illustrator or publisher in the future. and demand for quality books. Don't settle for low quality books. Look for things that are well written and inspiring. And yes, enjoy, and most of all, love the process. Don't make it a chore. I feel a lot of times parents are so worried about making children read that it becomes like, padna padega every day. You must do the reading, but it should be a joy. It should be something that you look forward to, that opens up a new world, and you want to know more about it. So make it a joyous experience.
Thank you so much for chatting with me, ma'am. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you. It will be an even greater pleasure to read all of your books and get to know much more about our culture, the South Asian Indian culture. The audience can get their books from the links provided in the description or visit any crossword store in their city. This session was supported by Adidev Press. You can get the copy of the books from the Adidev Press website as well. A must-read book for today's generation. Wish you a happy reading, friends. I
Thank you.
once again thank you and the audience in front of the systems. Get ready for the quiz based on this session and do visit www.oclfnagpur.com to participate in a quiz related to this session and win exciting gifts and prizes. Details given in the description. A giant Orange City Literature Festival will be back in November 22 in Nagpur, the city of oranges. Get ready for the physical fest in the coming winter, attending awesome sessions and interacting with your favorite authors. Keep following us for the update on this festival of words. Thank you all. And thank you so much, ma'am, for
Thank you
being
for
here.
having me here. It was lovely chatting with you, dear.